today. We're going to get deep today. We're going to start a discussion today about the teachings of James. James was Jesus' half-brother. And throughout the scholastic community, there has been finally some consensus that yes, that is the James, this is the James, who wrote the book of James. And that's always up for debate about who did what. But we come to agree on that for now anyway. Being Jesus' half-brother, James grew up with Jesus. Of course, oddly enough, during those years, James did not believe that Jesus was the Son of God. When Jesus was older and beginning ministry and doing miracles, James was not convinced that Jesus was God's Son.
That'd be tough.
Be tough.
It'd be hard to think of my siblings as...
Who do you think you are? The Son of God? Just because you're the Son of God. It was only after the resurrection, when Jesus appeared to James, that James became all in and believed that he was God's Son. James becomes the head of the church in Jerusalem. And he is writing to Christians that are spread throughout the countryside outside of Jerusalem. He's writing a down-to-earth letter to down-to-earth people. Other apostles during that time, Paul and many others, are writing more heady letters. They're talking about sin and salvation and faith and grace, which were necessary for understanding the foundation of the faith. But James thought, if you know all that, but you still don't know how to live day to day, what good is it? This letter is a letter of spiritual formation, and it's about the vitality of congregations. James is sort of the first spiritual director. His book is a call to action. This letter is a call to action. It's just not philosophy. And in our life, action is what denotes that we're living, right? If you're alive, you're moving, you're doing something. James is a call to action. His words are as relevant for us today as they were then.
We kind of, especially in Europe and North America, we've kind of become complacent. Kind of like the Israelites, God warned them when they went into the promised land. When things are going well, you're going to forget about me and how you got here. And so things have gone pretty well for us. About 300 years after the church was founded, Constantine declared it the Church of the Holy Roman Empire and stopped the persecutions. It was no longer hard to be a Christian. In fact, you had to be a Christian. And that marriage of church and state has been with us for 1,700 very long years. And so it's very hard to distinguish between the church and the state. And we've had it pretty good. We have a great lifestyle. You start to forget that everything we have comes from God. You start to get complacent a little bit. I'm a good person, I believe, so I'm going to heaven. I say this about once a month. Jesus did not die to get you into heaven. Jesus died to get heaven into you on earth. In fact, Jesus never promised us an easy road, did he? Think about reading the Gospels. Think about what Jesus promised us. Let's start in Matthew. This is red letters. It means Jesus imagine that I came to bring peace to the earth. I came not to bring peace, but a sword. I have come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Your enemies will be right in your household. If you love your father or mother more than you love me, you are not worthy of being mine. Or if you love your son or daughter more than me, you are not worthy of being mine. If you refuse to take up your cross and follow me, you are not worthy of being mine. If you cling to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for me, you will find it. Does that sound like the kinder, gentler Jesus to you?
Yippee. So, we hear that. And we hear it. But do you really hear it? Suppose you live with someone who is not a believer, who is not a Christian, who does not put God first. This is what this says. This is what this means. Not everyone in your family may believe in Jesus. Not everyone in your family may worship or follow, more importantly. That's a hardship.
Yep.
That's one of the things you need some steadfastness about. Jesus said, I came, and some of you are going to believe, and some of the people you live with, your mother, your father, your brother,
Your son, your daughter, are not going to believe.
are not going to believe. And I expect you to still choose me first.
Everybody worships something.
That is not, I promised you a rose garden promise.
No. A little bit later, after Peter declares Jesus to be the Son of God in Matthew, Jesus turns to his disciples because Peter said, no, you don't go back to Jerusalem because they're looking to kill you and you can't go there. He turns and he says, get away from me, Satan, because you're thinking like a man and not as my follower. And then he turned to his disciples and he said, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Take up your cross and follow me. This sounds familiar. We just read it. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. And then in a blinding statement of the obvious, what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? So why is it so hard? Well, that's glassware back there.
Not going to burn it down today.
Okay. After the Last Supper, after the washing the feet in the Gospel of John, Jesus prays. Probably the most famous prayer in the Bible. He's praying with his disciples before he's arrested in the garden. He says to them, if the world hates you, remember that it hated me first. The world would love you as one of its own if you belong to it. But you are no longer part of the world. I chose you to come out of the world, so it hates you. Do you remember what I told you? A slave is not greater than the master. Here it comes. Since they persecuted me, naturally, they will persecute you. I never promised you a rose garden. And if they had listened to me, they will listen to you. They will do all this to you because of me, for they have rejected the one who sent me. James wrote to a church that was already being persecuted. The early church experienced suffering right out of the gate, including the churches that James led.
So the very first part of James' letter to these Christians, James 1, verses 2 through about 15. Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. If you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and He will give it to you. If you don't know what to do about a situation, day to day, pray about it. When you ask Him, be sure that your faith is in God alone. Be sure you're not listening for what you want to hear, because that's the easy thing to do. Do not waver, for a person with divided loyalty is as unsettled as a wave of the sea that is blown and tossed by the wind. Such people should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Their loyalty is divided between God and the world. That's the hearing what I want to hear and hearing what I need to hear part. And they are unstable in everything they do. God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation. I'm at verse 12 now. Afterward, they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love Him. And remember, when you are being tempted, do not say, God is tempting me. God is never tempted to do wrong. And God never tempts anyone. Temptation comes from our own desires. These desires which entice and drag us away from God's way. These desires give birth to sinful actions. Turning away from God. Those are the sinful actions. And when sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death. When you continue to turn away from God, you die. Your spiritual life dies. The footnote in this Bible says that rather than focusing on the pain of the struggle they face, James reminds these people that Jesus is always using that pain for life's good purpose. When we can lift our eyes from ourselves, when we can focus on something other than ourselves, to God's good purposes for the whole, pain is put in perspective. When I have to give up something that I like for the common good, and I do it, God puts that pain in perspective. It becomes a tool of transformation. I'm transformed. I'm changed. My heart is changed. As Jesus works to shape our hearts to be a little bit more like His own.
Now, don't get us wrong. We are not called to be masochists. We are not called to suffer for suffering's sake. We're called to suffer for a purpose. for God's purposes. And as James says, the trials and tribulations serve to make us stronger if we turn them over, if we do it because God's purposes are served. So we have a question for you to think about, talk about. We can talk about it here as a group. James says, take joy in your hardships. That's so countercultural, I don't know. Take joy in your hardships. I guess marathoners do that. Yeah. How can we learn to find joy in our sufferings and hardships? How do we do that?
Have you ever experienced that? Have you ever experienced joy out of a hardship?
I may not have known why I was going through it, but sometimes I got an answer. Normally it was a couple of months later why this was. And then later it made sense. At the time it made no sense.
Amanda says that they're going through a hardship that made no sense. Given some time and space, you can see that it makes sense. Would you say you experienced joy or more understanding?
I don't know. There are certain things I wouldn't really call very joyful.
I agree. That's hard. It's a hard joy out of hardship. Has hardship tested your faith? Patsy?
This past year.
This past year.
This past
Losing
year?
my sister and then my husband
Losing both your sister and your husband.
tested my faith greatly. But then I put my life into God's hands and now He gave me the strength to get through what I needed to get through.
Patience.
Lots of patience.
Persistence.
Yeah.
Perseverance. You're still on the journey.
I'm still on the journey. Moving forward.
Patience. That's a tough one. It is, isn't it? We live in a world of like instant gratification. I mean, 10 years ago, if you wanted to download a photo, you downloaded a photo, you pressed download, and you went away and had a cup of coffee, and it might show up 30 minutes later, right? And now, if it's not there instantly, we're ticked off.
Must not be working.
Yeah, who stole my bandwidth? What's going on? We're not patient. Long lines in the supermarket, right? Yeah. Why am I waiting? I shouldn't have to wait. Hey, why don't they open another line? How about long lights? Traffic lights, right? This is a long light. One of my favorites is when somebody pulls out, takes a chance, passes me, pulls right in, and 10 seconds later we get to a light and he's right there.
Oh, right there.
Yeah.
Then I look at him and go, ha! Glad you're ahead.
Well, I think it's an Amish saying, the hurrier I go, the behinder I get. You've probably heard it, probably a Minnesotan saying too. The hurrier I go, the behinder I get. So here's a question for you to think about. Where the heck are we going in such a hurry?
In Sandpoint.
Anywhere.
How do you get in a hurry here?
I mean, just, really.
I don't know, the Greeks have a word for that.
They do, yes.
Upamome. Aren't you glad you're not Greek?
Yeah. That's ancient Greek.
It means patience. But it means more than patience. It means unswerving constancy. patience beyond patience. We added persistence and perseverance because that's how we think
Unswerving constancy.
comes close, right? And you know, the Bible is a story of that. Time and time again, patience, being constant, being steadfast, holding to what God wants is the story of God's people. So James is saying, remember, you aren't the first people to have a bad day.
Yeah. If I were God, the Bible would have ended at Genesis 3.
When people messed up, that
Yeah,
didn't
that'd be
right?
it. We'd be done.
This perseverance teaches us, it's not to, these troubles are not to defeat us. And James will talk more about that in the weeks to come. They are to offer us a chance to defeat whatever is bothering us, to rise above it, to develop strength of character, to fall at the feet of adversity and soar above it. You know, there's all kinds of songs about that. To overcome. James 5, we're going to jump clear to the end. It's
That's 'cause-
important.
Yeah, he thought it was pretty important.
He reiterates, for examples of patience in suffering, dear brothers and sisters, look at the prophets. The prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. We give great honor to those who endure under suffering. For instance, you know about a man named Job, a man of great endurance. You can see how the Lord was kind to him at the end, for the Lord is full of tenderness and mercy.
The patience of Job. Right.
For the Lord is full of tenderness and mercy. So who in your life has modeled this kind of steadfast behavior, this patience and perseverance, this picture of faith? Who has modeled that for you? Despite all hardships, they hold fast to God and the promises. And has that example changed the way you experience hardship and how you face it? So James wrote about a down-to-earth faith, for down-to-earth people. He wrote about a down-to-earth Jesus, a Jesus that modeled exactly how we are to live. And he points out that the truth is no good unless you're able to live it. Unless you know how to live the truth, what good is knowing the truth? Well, as we go the next couple weeks, James offers a practical guide on how to live the truth.
Father Richard Rohr, who some of you are familiar with, kind of summarizes where the Church of Christ is at this point in time in history. It says, we worshiped Jesus instead of following him on his same path. We made Jesus into a mere religion instead of a journey toward union with God and everything else. And this shift made us into a religion of belonging and believing instead of a religion of transformation. James offers us a choice. We can have membership and information, or we can live like Jesus and have transformation in a whole new life. Choice is ours. Choose wisely. Amen.